Okay, here's a different kind of a rant. But believe it or not, it's football orientated. I don't normally get kind of football political, but this kind of had to be done. Kind of get off my chest. And first and foremost, most people, or some people, not unless you know me, is my football club in the UK is Tottenham Hotspur, and obviously, you know, the problem that's going on there with the Conte being sacked, them saying that the players threw him under the bus. Some players blaming themselves. Some players can't wait to see the back of him. And then obviously now it's the fight to see which manager they get, who wants to take that club, which for me is a poison chalice. And obviously now with the remaining 10 games left, because obviously tonight plays Everton trying to get into Champions League place, and whether or not people feel that Tottenham, well, whether or not they feel they deserve it, which I might dwell a little bit on that later on in the video. But initially I wanted to sit there and talk about Chelsea Football Club, even though I don't support them, and obviously they're one of our rivals, and I was actually born in Chelsea, but I'm not a Chelsea supporter. But anyway, obviously this follows on the news, recent news, obviously with Potter being sacked from Chelsea, because obviously where they are in the league and the points, and obviously with a club like Chelsea, they want to be winning things and winning cups and trophies and getting into the Champions League, etc, etc, etc. And I wanted to sit there and say that I personally thought that the way they treated Tuchel, I think, was absolutely appalling, especially during the COVID thing when he was basically the spokesman for Chelsea, and obviously with Abramovich, obviously with his Russian ties, and then obviously the government wanted to sit there and obviously get rid of him, obviously, and then bring a new set of owners in, and then obviously and then obviously the new owners came in, who obviously they're American billionaires, and then they basically obviously got rid of him, which I think was unfair. And then as soon as they established Potter from Brighton was going to come in, personally I knew it was going to last. Now, don't get me wrong, I do think Potter is a good manager, and especially to what he did at Brighton. And obviously they don't have a lot of money, but they've been playing good football, and even with him gone there and their manager's there now, they're still playing some really good football. So just because that they're not one of the bigger league teams, obviously people sit there and kind of take their eye off the ball, that they do play some good football. So anyway, and one of the reasons why I thought is that personally I just thought that he just wasn't ready for the job yet. I feel that what he needed to do, that if he was going to wanted to stretch his wings from Brighton, go to say like a bigger side, and then work your way up, and then maybe in the next 4 or 5 years, then you could go to say like a Chelsea or a big, or a Manchester United or Liverpool, or not a big club, and and then he could do it. I mean, I potentially could see him in the future being an England manager as well. And then to me, it was a bit of a rush, and obviously the pressures of running Chelsea Football Club, because obviously they want instant success, and that's the thing like back in the 80s and the 90s, where clubs weren't kind of like that, where you had like teams like Manchester United and Alex Ferguson, who obviously initially Alex Ferguson wasn't great at Manchester United, believe it or not. People kind of forget about that history, and then obviously we see the legacy of Alex Ferguson now, which is yet to be surpassed. So my whole kind of thing, what's kind of going on, so I knew it wasn't going to end well, and obviously they signed him on a 5-year contract, and obviously they've been buying players right, left and centre for stupid amounts of money, sign them on 5-year contracts, and obviously on 7 or 8 year deals. Obviously there's a loophole around that, as somebody will be able to explain, or you can look up yourself. And obviously being a Tottenham fan, obviously people sit and see it's been jealous, but for me this kind of structure, I think, to me doesn't kind of work, and which I'll explain in the video. And then obviously things haven't gone too well, and then obviously they've got the sack. Now he's got the sack. Now what I did find really kind of silly is when you look at the media and where they, to me, it seems to be like, just because it's Chelsea Football Club, to me it feels like they've just sugar-coated the whole thing, in terms of like they don't seem to be kind of really going on about it. And then when you look at in terms of what that club is going through now, it's not that far different from what Tottenham's going through, except the difference is that obviously the media don't like Tottenham. And so I'll delve into why. Obviously you get Potter. there are two types of managers that you can get. You can get a one that wants instant success, like a Conte. And with managers that want instant success, you have to spend the money on the big players in the short term, and then obviously they're not going to stay there in the long term. And obviously they want if there's a player that they want, that's the player that they want, not the board doing it. Then you get project managers, kind of like how Poch was, or even how Klopp was, where what they do is that they basically have to go into, or even Arteta at Arsenal, where what they have to do is that because the team's been in such a mess for over the years, it's a lot of kind of like clearing out who you think is good enough, who's the dead wood, bringing in players that you actually want, and then bringing in the youth, and then slowly kind of galvanising and building the side you kind of want it to be. And that's kind of the project manager, obviously, that a lot of clubs want. But a lot of clubs aren't very patient when it comes to, they want instant success. And I think obviously that with what Eddie Howe is doing at Newcastle, where they've been taken over by a billionaire, by a Saudi group, and they're not kind of overly going mad in terms of what they're exactly doing, but they're bringing in the players, bringing in the youth players, giving them a chance and playing them alongside of each other, and then basically they're playing really good football, and you don't see them going overtly mad. You've got Arteta, obviously, where he had a rough few seasons, and obviously people were comparing him to Conte and Jose Mourinho, saying what has he won. And then you had big name players like Aubameyang, who was their top, I think it was one of their biggest summer signings. Obviously he did something during that time, and then people think that because obviously that you've got a superstar that's bigger than, they think they're bigger than the club. So it's like, oh, but I've done something bad in my private life, you basically can't drop me because you need me. And then what I love about Arteta, even though I hate Arsenal with a passion, he had the balls to say, you know what, you're not bigger than the club, you've broken the rules, you're being dropped from the first team, you're losing your captaincy, you're not even going to be in the squad. And then he allowed the other youngsters and other players to, to get given a goal, and then it's paid off. And then in the end, didn't need him anymore, and ended up ripping up his contract and then got rid of him. And now look at Arsenal now, they're flying. And what I love about Arsenal now is the fact that they're bringing in a lot of their youth players and coming in, they're playing as if they're seasoned pros, and then they're not buying players for the sake of it, like what Chelsea were doing. Like they were buying, like for example, Chelsea buying 7 or 8 players. Now it will be different if they were actually players that, for example, that the manager actually wanted. Now this leads me on to another irritating thing that I find, and this goes on at Tottenham as well, where it's the board that's buying the players rather than the manager buying the players. So then what ends up happening is that the manager obviously doesn't fancy those players. He sits there and goes, right, I'm not going to sit there and I'm not going to play them now. So even if I've got injuries in that particular field and that player could do it, I'm not going to pick that player because that's not who I want. Because that's not who I wanted to sign, which is what Conte did with players like Spence and 1 or 2 others there. Which, yeah, I do get it in a way, but if you're, especially if your team's not doing very well, you've got injuries, right? You have to sit there and take it on the chin and think, you know what, I'm going to give these players a go because the current players now aren't playing very well or they're injured. So they find it stupid. So Chelsea was sitting there and going out, spending silly amounts of money. At the end of the day, it's the board's money, so they can do what they want. But they're not buying the players for me that that Potter kind of wanted. They're just buying, and then it's like, there you go, we've bought 7 or 8 or 9 players, whatever it is they bought. You sit there and we expect results. Now, just you could buy several world-class players and then they just don't fit. It's just kind of the the way it kind of is, right? Where players are not all players are going to kind of fit together. And as before, you don't see the media. I don't sit there and saying, well, you know what, right? Even one of the ex-Chelsea defenders, Jody Morris, was saying, oh, that if Abramovich was still in charge, that he would have sacked Potter a long time ago because of the results. Yeah, he's right. But then what he fails to mention is what would have happened is that he probably wouldn't have picked him in the first. He wouldn't have picked him in the first place. He would have gone for a more world-class, seasoned, proven manager, which is what they've done in part of the brand, which has been in charge. Wrongly or rightly, you can say that he sacked a lot of them, but he did bring in quality managers, and to me, Potter kind of wasn't kind of proven yet, and so in one sense, I kind of feel sorry for him. But in another mindset, I kind of don't feel sorry for him, because obviously the expectations of what they want. And to me, and I think what's going wrong, and this is why it runs levels parallels with Spurs, is that you actually see with Tottenham is that obviously you had Conte, who is not a project manager. He wants the big name players. They basically, he wants the big name players. Now, he must have known that Tottenham aren't kind of going to do that kind of thing. So he's basically been given players that the board want, not what he wants, which is going to cause problems. And then after that, right, Tottenham don't like to sit there and spending money, which is why I think it's stupid that they're trying to get fourth place at Champions League, which we know that the Enoch and Levy seem to only care about fourth place to get money, to sit there to stuff their pockets with, and all they seem to care about is doing this Formula 1 Mario Kart thing there, boxing concerts and Beyonce concerts. And it would be great if they were actually using that money to help buy players, but they're not doing it. It seems to be like they're doing it on the kind of cheap. Conte, for example, he's not the kind of player where he's going to bring in youth players in and start bringing them in through the academy, which I've been disappointed with, that even under Mourinho and Conte, neither one of them have done that. And you've got players like Scarlett, who probably may not be quite ready yet, and they've been put on loan. I could sit there and see a lot of potential. And then there was this player called Marcus Edwards, who Tottenham didn't think was good enough. They got rid of him, and he ended up went abroad, and then ended up being like really, really good. And so it's things like that where when I look at players like teams like Arsenal, I think to myself, well, they're giving their youth players the chance. You've got to manage like Ten Hag, who obviously you've seen what he did with Ronaldo, where it was like, yeah, I don't care if you're a world-class superstar, I'm going to drop you. And he had the balls to do that. And I think the problem with the Chelsea thing now is that obviously what they should have done is decide whether or not you're going to have a project manager or a manager that's going to win you things in the short term. And either way, just allow him, if he sits there and wants these certain players in these key positions, and this is who he wants, and obviously they can afford them because they're billionaires, go out there and buy them, right? That's what you have to do. Or if you want a project manager, you have to give the manager time. Obviously, Potter's had 7 months, and obviously he had a 5-year contract, so they're going to pay him out, and to them, it's kind of nothing anyway. So, I don't know. It's just completely and utterly ridiculous in terms of the way things gone on, and even with Tottenham, for example, the whole club's in a mess. Where obviously they threw Conte under the bus. You've got players there that kind of really need to go, and they've done this with other managers before. And for me, what needs to happen there, they need to get a project manager. The board needs to stop interfering. If there's a player that they want, basically you should be able to have several options. So say example that you need a centre back, and you put down 4 centre backs that you want, and then at least try to get one of them. And that's what should be happening. And I think that's what should be happening with Chelsea. Let the manager manage. Let him decide who he doesn't want and who he doesn't, and then don't interfere. But it seems like to me that too many of these board things are playing. It's like they're playing with Monopoly money and playing as if they're playing football manager. And again, one of the biggest, they're buying all these players for the sake of it. One of their biggest priorities was buying a forward. Look at the back in the days when they had like Drogba and Gianluca Vialli, and you had like Eden Hazard and Zola. All these, they've always had really world-class strikers, and you look at all the current teams, whether it's Tottenham with Kane, Manchester United with Rashford, Salah at Liverpool, all these teams have strikers up front scoring them goals. And you look at Chelsea, and they're not having it. Obviously, they sold one, and Lukaku's at loan at Inter Milan. And to me, if they'd sat there and bought the players that let him bring in the youth, let Potter bring in the youth players, bring in players that he actually wanted, not let them interfere, buy the priority players that they need in the key positions that they need. It's the same thing with Tottenham as well, where Tottenham don't have a playmaker. The defence is kind of getting old. They need a left back, the centre back, and they're not sitting there and they're buying the wrong key players in the wrong places, and they're wondering why they're not kind of winning anything, or why Tottenham kind of up bottom it. And as I said before, I'm only being honest not as a rival towards Chelsea, because I support Tottenham, but I'm just calling these things out as a football fan, where you can see these things are not right. These football or sports media, they're not even calling out the board in terms of what the way they treated Potter, the way they were buying players for the sake of it, or the way they treated Tuchel. Because it's Chelsea, they kind of just let it go. But obviously, if it's a Tottenham result, but obviously we saw what happened with Conte when they got rid of him, and well, they quick to sit there and criticise that, which quite rightfully so. But they're not kind of prepared to kind of really do anything if it's like Chelsea, for argument's sake. But if it's like a club that they don't exactly like, then they'll sit there and they'll rip into them, because obviously it's because